There you go. Shall we go? Hello, everybody. My name is Samia Assad. I am with the New Mexico Women's March. I am joined by my colleague. Go ahead, Allie Mary. She's with the New Mexico Women's March. And we are here today to talk to our fabulous Secretary of State, Maggie Toulouse Oliver, and our county clerks from Doña County, Amanda López Askin, and from Bernalillo County, Miss Linda Stover. Today, it's a political moment we live in that seems surreal. And as I ask you to talk a little about yourself, I want you to bring into context how you feel as a woman in power, getting out the vote, inspiring women to vote. So let me know how you feel and tell me a little more about yourself. Go ahead, take it, Maggie.
Okay, I was gonna say, who do you want to start? Well, first of all, Samia and Women's March, I'm really pleased to be here today with my amazing colleagues, Amanda López Askin and Linda Stover, who are really the ones doing the incredibly hard work right now of making sure that our elections run successfully in the two biggest counties in the state. Of course, I was fortunate enough to be able to work on the ground level like Linda does in Bernalillo County for 10 years and now for almost 4 years as Secretary of State. And, you know, it's not by chance that I came into the county clerk's role or the Secretary of State's role, because voting rights and the ability for all of us to participate in our democracy has always been an incredible passion of mine. Since I was really a little girl, I've always been interested in government and politics and watching our election process, and have been very proud of our democracy. And when the opportunity came along for me to be the protector of that democracy and to try to make things work better for every single voter of the state, I took it, and it has been the most challenging, inspiring, difficult, hand-wringing, experience of my life, but it's been worth it. And especially as a woman, I have to say, we have a lot of male colleagues. I have a lot of male Secretary of State colleagues that are really wonderful, doing a great job. We have a lot of wonderful male county clerks throughout the state. But, at the end of the day, I just feel a camaraderie with my fellow women who do this work, who stay up super late, who wake up super early. We have children and families, grandchildren in many cases, and we're dedicating our lives to caring for them as well as carrying out this important responsibility that we have every day. And so I personally love being a cheerleader for our democracy, especially as a woman, because so much of what we do have as women in this society has come from women gaining the right to vote.
Thank you. Amanda, go ahead, take it.
Sure. So thank you, Maggie. I've always loved to hear about where you started from and how you got here, because I'm a little late to the game, so to speak. My name is Amanda López Askin. I'm proud to serve Doña County as the county clerk. I was appointed in September of 2018, with just happened to coincide with a very high profile, I'll just say high profile election. And so to say that I hit the ground running is not an exaggeration. And during my time as clerk, I administered that election, as well as an election, which was the first consolidated election where we were able to get all of our municipalities within Doña County to participate. And the city of Las Cruces chose to, administer their election through ranked choice voting. So that, as you can imagine, had its own challenges. And then my fourth election, I should say, we did have a small male for Hatch, but my fourth election was the pandemic primary, as we're calling it. And so I kind of feel like at this point, I actually would really want to be here, because it has been, I'm waiting for the stress of a regular election versus one that seems to have a lot of very special circumstances am proud to serve with a lot of really a diverse group of county clerks that have, different perspectives, different worldviews, and I think it makes us better as a whole. I was born and raised in Doña County, and the reason that I was inspired to even apply to be clerk, the previous clerk had resigned, and there was an opportunity. I just finished my doctorate, and I was looking for a challenge. And when you ask the universe for something, very often it answers in ways that you did not know it was going to. And so I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I decided I didn't want to be a research professor. I didn't want to be chained, frankly, to a desk and write. And so I was working in the mental health field, which my background is pretty extensive in, and community organizing advocacy. But I've always been an active, passionate, engaged voter that was really interested in the leaders that we chose for our community. And the reason that I will always talk about my mom is that my mom grew up in a part of the state that was pretty segregated. She had a really hard time. And when she moved to Las Cruces, she became part of the community. And part of that for her was registering to vote. And so when I turned 18, she drove me to get, registered. And then I always say, like, mom guilt is real, because initially the reasons I voted, because she would ask me, and it was just easier to vote than to have to, God forbid, lie to my mother. But after a few years, it got to be part of who I was. And then I started asking my friends, even in college, like, are you registered to vote? Like, why aren't you? That's so weird. My mom, And so I was fortunate to have a role model in my life that really told me that I deserve to be present and accounted for. And what I know is that when you have parents that do that, you're much more likely to be an engaged, active voter. And so I am proud to serve our community. I'm proud to serve, I call Maggie, the Secretary of State's the mothership. And so I'm proud to really have a great cohesive relationship with the mothership, and they do everything they can to help us administer elections in a way that's the best for our communities, at the same time empowering us to make decisions within our own communities. And the responsibility that we each carry is immense, and I would not be here, frankly, fighting battles every day if I did not just so deeply believe in what we're doing for our state. We need to talk more about how we do elections well in New Mexico. We need to talk more about how we're on lists that we're not happy about in terms of our rankings. But in terms of election administration, I would argue with anybody that we're in the top 5, and we are in the top 10, especially if you look at the MIT, reports connected to election administration. We do a good job, and there's a lot of reasons for it. So I credit a lot of the pro-voter stances our legislators take, as well as the support from our Secretary of State's office, and I am done. I could go on.
So much. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that load of information. That was really wonderful to hear from you. Linda, I'd love to hear your voice.
My story's a little different. I've got a little more time on these 3 gals. I'm from Carlsbad, Eddy County. I grew up there. When I was in the 3rd grade, my dad was running for state representative, and I got picked up by the truant officer because I was ditching school and going downtown and handing out his cards. And everybody thought that was really funny. I worked for him really hard when I was in the 3rd grade. Now they put him in jail. Then they wrote a little story in the newspaper. I have grown up in the Democratic Party. I have grown up believing in that a woman has a place on this earth. My father always told me I did. He told me never to take a back seat, to always sit in the front.
That's
So
right.
I had a lot of support from family and friends as I grew up in politics. I was very active in the party, as you know, Samia. I've been very familiar with your family and Maggie. Amanda's new to me in the last couple of years, but we've all been friends a long time. I believe so strongly in this process of the freedom that we've been given and the right that we have to vote. I'm real active in the naturalization programs. And I always go and talk to some of the older people that are getting naturalized, that look like they're in their 80s, and I'll say, why are you doing this at this point in your life? Every single time I'm told, so I can vote. That just brings home to me this gift that we're given to vote. So to have the opportunity to do this is really something. I was offered the job of the Bureau of Elections by former county clerk, oh my God, I just thought of her name, Judy Woodward. And I accepted it. And I was going to start in January, but I worked for my dad. So my mom says to me, do not tell your daddy until after Christmas, because he's going to fire you when you tell him, number 1. Number 2, you'll ruin Christmas because he's going to have a fit. So Christmas Eve, my dad ended up in the hospital. He had congestive heart failure. By July, he had lung cancer. So I didn't get to take that job. And I was very disappointed because I so desperately wanted to get involved in elections and just this political process right here. My husband, Bob Stover, had watched me go through that. He knew how much I wanted to do that. And as life does tricks to you, later down the road, my husband had gotten ill and we knew that he was not going to live. And we talked about what I was going to do with my life. I ran into a friend that was the county treasurer. He asked me, I told him I was going to look for a job. He offered me a job in his office. So I go home and tell my husband, I said, I've got a job when you're gone that will be nice and something that I enjoy. And when I told Bob what it was, he said, Linda, you don't want that job. He said, in 20 years, the only job you ever wanted was to be county clerk. Run for county clerk, and if you lose, find a job. So every day I thank Bob Stover for this job because I would have never done this if he hadn't brought that up. And Maggie knows that story. She
I
was
love that
around.
story.
Yeah, it's very heartwarming, but that's really the truth. And this is a gift to me to be able to help the people in Bernalillo County navigate a pandemic and the number of votes that we're handling and the people we're working with. Our little office has been very involved in education. I've been teaching classes in the schools. We're doing one at the Career Enrichment Center, I think it's next week.
Oh, nice.
It's such a privilege not only to be a clerk, but to work with the 33 clerks in the state who are dynamite people. They put their political parties aside and they all come together, don't they, Amanda? Well, Maggie knows it too. We all work very, very hard together to get this thing processed. This is a gift, and I am just so grateful that I'm able to be a part of it.
Well, thank you so much. It sounds like all three of you are such a gift to New Mexico.
Well,
Really inspiring to hear your stories and the faces behind, the names and the driving force behind getting out the vote in New Mexico. Let's get to business. So let's just pretend I'm a new voter in a pandemic. How do you motivate me? And what are the tools you're going to give me and the resources you're going to provide me as a voter? Miss Maggie T. Oliver, go ahead.
I'm going to let the clerks speak to a lot of what they're doing in their communities because they really do have some amazing programs going on.
Okay.
But I'll just talk about a few of the things that we've done statewide to make it easier for folks to vote in the last couple of years. Everyone who's listening probably knows we now make it super easy for folks to register to vote online through our voter information portal, nmvote.org. It connects you to all 33 county clerks throughout the state, so no matter where you are in the state, you can register to vote online. You can apply for your absentee ballot online. Now, every time you visit the motor vehicle division before you leave, you have to basically answer a question about whether you want to double check your voter registration, update that. So we are trying to make it so that voter registration is not a hurdle or a burden. And of course, we all know that voter registration is the first step in the voting process. Amanda and Linda have been doing amazing things with expanding early voting opportunities and voter education in their communities. But what we're trying to do at the state level is help get the information out and get the word out about the voting process, to demystify it, to make it simpler for folks to understand. We're going to be rolling out a series of little how-to videos on our website. When I get my absentee ballot, what do I do with it? What are these envelopes for? What do I need to make sure I write on the outside? So we're trying to do those sorts of things that really will apply to any voter, no matter which county you're in. But lastly, what I'll say, and then hand it off to my colleagues, is that the argument that I try to make this year is that, of any year, I think that every single American has understood and has been deeply affected by the decisions that government makes. Whether it was that you were not allowed to, you couldn't leave your house for months on end, your kids were home from school for months on end, and you were all of a sudden in the role of teacher and doing your job from home. You lost a job, right? Because of these decisions. Maybe you got a check in the mail that helped, or you got an extra $600 every week from the federal government, along with your unemployment that helped, right? If you didn't understand before how critical the decisions of government are in your life, you know it now. And if you want to have a say in those decisions moving forward, now more than ever, it's important to register and have a voice in our government.
Thank you. Linda or Amanda, who wants to take this on first?
Go ahead, Amanda. That's going to be hard to beat. What she just said.
I love your charm, Linda.
Go ahead,
Go ahead,
Amanda.
Oh, okay. Is it me?
Amanda.
So in terms of how, so yesterday I presented to, in the spring, not this spring, but the spring of 2019, I went to every high school in Doña County, and we were able to register over 700 high school seniors to vote, right? And during that presentation, I talked a lot about representation. And so although they had various different demographics, so the one thing that they all had in common is that they were young. And I talked about, and so I do this whole presentation where I really try to isolate how little they are at the table, right? And how if you are not at the table, what do I say? You're on the menu.
That's right.
And so my continual encouragement is like, what are you passionate about? What do you care about? What are the issues? And inevitably I'll ask a kiddo and they'll say, oh, baseball. And I'm like, okay, well, I get that. But let's go a little bit deeper. Let's talk about the issues. And so they may say, whatever it is, fill in the blank. And so the challenge with our job is that although we do have a letter next to our name that says D, we always want to be welcoming to every single person that should have a say in our community and who represents them. And so I think we are constantly aware that our job is to be nonpartisan. And as much as they, and I say they, and you can fill in the blank, as much as there is feedback that is negative about our party or our beliefs or the platform that we support in our worldview, ultimately, it is so important to me that I tell people, it doesn't matter how you vote to me. Please just show up. That is absolutely something that's a priority. So what I've tried to do is be engaging to every single portion of the community, even areas that historically maybe have not gotten attention. So going to the high school and doing all of those presentations was really helpful. And I think what it did was in the presentation, because my background is in organizing and in youth, I was able to kind of hopefully, spark them a little. And we were super happy to get the numbers we did. Well, this year presented a challenge. We couldn't go to schools. They couldn't go to the schools. So we have tried to be creative in how we engage. But a large portion of what I find myself doing, especially in Doña County, is dispelling myths, misinformation, urban legends, memes, and everything in between that gives voters wrong information. The more we provide good, solid information and the more we encourage them to go to trusted sources like our Secretary of State or like their county clerks, the more they're going to have, they're not going to be disappointed and like, oh, well, I thought it was this way, or wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And in Pennsylvania, so a lot of what I do is this. I talk a lot. And one thing that I will say that I do in my office that I think my deputy chief, Lindsay Bachman, is like, oh gosh, I call everybody back. Imagine that. Every single person I call back.
That's somebody who loves their work.
But you know what it is? If they are concerned about the electoral process, if they are invested in their community enough to call the county clerk and leave a message,
right.
if they're concerned about anything, I consider it a solemn obligation to answer those questions. And so inevitably, and I can kind of circle back to the primary, there were some challenges in timelines. There just was. And we had to acknowledge them so we could learn from it and move forward. And so when I had a voter who particularly was a veteran, who was an amputee, as well as an organ transplant recipient, who had not gotten his absentee ballot, and he had done everything right, and he left a message for me, and he was not happy with me. It was on my shoulders. I called him back, and I knew he was angry because he had left me a voicemail and an email, and he was angry. And what I said to him was what I would tell any voter: you're right. You did everything right. You have every right to be upset. Let's see if we can figure this out for you, because I want you to have faith in our process. And I want you to know that regardless, because part of his email and his initial accusation was because of my party affiliation. And I wanted to somehow, block his ability to vote. And so anytime that happens, I always do my best to get ahead of that. And so the gentleman was able to get his ballot, but he was the exact person that probably should not be at a polling location during a pandemic. And so luckily everything worked out. He got his ballot in time. He was able to vote, etc. But not everybody is I can help to that extent. But I will tell you, probably 2 weeks ago, I was going through my emails and I made sure to find his name because I'd flagged it, and I called him and I just made sure to follow up. Like, you know what? It's X amount of months later. I'm glad you were able to vote. Have you made a plan for this election? I know you were concerned. I want you to know that I'm concerned. So I think if we can offer as much as possible that ability to understand, like, politics aside, does that even exist? But politics aside, I am a person who loves my community. I am a person, regardless of my background and my beliefs, that wants you to be president and accounted for, and how can I help you? And I really hope that that continues to be the message from our office as well as our staff, right? Because they are the ambassadors that are answering the phone. And that is something we work and strive to do every single day.
So Amanda, you live in the South. Before I get to Linda,
Sure.
have you seen an increase in women voters?
Not necessarily.
Especially women of color voters.
No, I can't say. It's really hard to track right now because everything is coming in online, honestly, because there are so few community events, because, you just aren't necessarily tracking it like you would. Because I could tell you out of 700 young people that I registered to vote during my, visit to the high schools, I could probably give you a feel, but it's a little harder right now. It's been steady, but the numbers are lower than they have been in previous presidential years, but that's to be expected, connected to what's going on. There does seem to be more of an energy from young people. Okay. That's my anecdotal impression, but there does seem to be a heightened interest, and particularly young people, whenever I've presented, and I've probably done a dozen presentations on Zoom in the last few weeks. I presented to the Enlace group at one of the high schools yesterday. But, when I ask questions like, hey, what are you passionate about? Inevitably, the two things that come up, and I'm just saying what they say, I'm not necessarily identifying something in particular, is climate and Black Lives Matter. Those are the two things that are inspiring them to be president and accounted for.
And that's the part of the state. They're all the same way. It's just amazing. Yeah, my kids tell me you're out by the time we vote. My 16-year-old already knows what's going on. Like, his generation's going to elect a new system and a new way of life. They're very active. Thank you. Linda, go ahead.
Well, I think young people are a lot more aware. I've got a 14-year-old grandson. It may just be the climate that he lives in because he hears it all the time. But he and I talk about local politics. We talk about who his actual school board member is. We talk about what that person does. I want everybody to remember that even though we've got a top of the ticket, this part down here is what runs our lives on a day-to-day basis. And we need to really pay attention to that. This is all the gobbledygook up here, but down here is where it gets lost and there's business. That's where your taxes gets raised. That's where everybody that represents you on any board is elected. I was elected to the AMACA board twice. This will be my fourth countywide race. And people didn't even know what that was. They were, since I could say it, they thought I should get elected to it. What is AMACA? So I try to educate people on their backyard, on what's around them and what they're actually voting for there, who their state rep is, who their state senator is, who's on the school board, who's their county commissioner, who's their city councilor. Be involved in that. Know what issues. Albuquerque has 4 questions on the ballot this time. There goes your money. Is that where you want it to go? So I try to stay down here when we talk. We've gone to several of the schools and actually had elections. We took a ballot on demand and a tabulator, and they did campaigns and put signs up on the walls. And then we actually gave them a ballot. The principal gave us names ahead of time. So they actually voted the ballot. At the end of the day, we hung the ribbon. And kids got really excited over actually doing that. We gave them an I just voted sticker. And it was fun. It was exciting. And I hope that when we get back to halfway being normal, we'll be able to continue to do that. Kids are interested if you can spark their interest. They'll pay. If you talk about something they might know about. And it gets lost up here. point
I
of
think
view.
that's so accurate, Linda. I know that when I've presented at the high schools, we're one of the few communities that has a school-based health center in every high school. And that was the world that I worked in previously, advocating for, health services for young people. And so when I have this whole thing I do with them, but one of the things I ask is, how many of you know that you have a school-based health center? And they're like, because they're like, they're on their phone, they're doing other things, but most of them know, some of them used it. And I say, well, who do you think decided that you could have a school-based health center? And they're like, oh, my principal, or oh, my teachers, or, oh, the superintendent. And I said, actually, your school board is the one that decided whether you could have comprehensive health care and access to it every single day in school. And you're used to it. But I'm going to tell you now that this is not far and wide across the state. Your school board decided this was a priority. And who elects your school board? And there are some conversations nationally about whether young people that are younger than 18 should participate in elections. And I think the jury's out. And frankly, I don't even know where I stand on that. I need to do probably more research and think about it a little bit more, because it's something that literally just cropped up in the last week or two. But what about, the idea of them being able to participate in school board elections? I think that's something that we should think about, right? Because the younger that they start to vote, what it means is that the longer they feel part of that process, right? And that's why we talked about, I did a forum last night, it was asked specifically about felons. And what I know about that is that the more, if they have access to individuals who have completed their sentences and, paid their dues, et cetera, have completed, if they are invited into the process and they register to vote, the recidivism rate, and the more they lower, and the more they connect, the more connected they feel to their community, right? And so I think we just need to be thoughtful about like the bigger picture and be less punitive, which sometimes seems to rule, the culture, our culture.
Yep. Maggie, I want to ask you about the ballots. You're mailing them out on the 6th, right?
Well, I'm not mailing them.
The county clerks are. Yeah, I'm so sorry. The state. So
That's
that's a question for all three of you. I had a question asked of me. A friend of mine, and she was confused. Says if we vote in earlier and we submit our ballots early, we go to the mobile stations, and maybe Linda can talk about that.
Yeah.
Is that counted as a vote, or is that delayed as an absentee vote? There's a little confusion as to voting early. What does it count as an actual vote, or does it count? Is it counted after the 3rd?
It's all counted on the
More
same.
information about ballots.
It's all a vote. We're going to have, we got sued by the Republican Party, so I missed a deadline of 10 days for filing for a drop-off location at the State Fair. And District Judge Erin O'Connell ruled against me on that 10-day waiver. She wouldn't give it to me, so I missed that. So they're not going to allow me to have the mobile voting unit at the State Fair for drop-off ballots. And that would have been a no-contact drop-off ballot right to the county clerk's office by putting them in those ballot boxes. We are going to have one on 5th and Marquette where you drive by and drop it off, and you just put it in yourself, get your own I voted sticker, and away you go. Every one of our early voting locations, which is 18, will have drop boxes. All of our 70 election day sites will have drop boxes. So if you go to an early voting site or an election day site and it looks like a line, remember that they're going to be standing 6 feet apart. So it may not be quite as long as it looks. But if you get there and let the poll worker know you've got a ballot, you go straight in and put it in the ballot box. We'll be picking those up several times a day. We've got people that'll be rotating around getting those. Every vote, Samia, is a vote. It doesn't matter whether you vote early or you vote on election day. It all comes together on November 3rd at 7 o'clock. So that's our point.
Okay.
But we would like you to do it earlier to help us get we've hired 100 extra people for our absentee board because we're getting so many. Today, I think as of today, we have 170,000. And I went over to the AES warehouse today and looked at them running ballots and how they were doing because I'm getting nervous because it's getting really close to the 6th. But they're going to have it done. They're going to have it done by midnight, Sunday night. They'll be bailed and ready to go to the post office Tuesday morning. So I feel really confident we're going to get it out. And when you get those ballots, go ahead and fill it out and send it back either by mail, or that's the first day of early voting. Take it into a voting site and deposit it. Get yourself a sample ballot right now and look at what you've got to vote on. In Bernalillo County, it's two-sided. Every state legislator is up for election. We got 12 judges. We got 4 questions. We got all these county people. Forget all this up here. You know what you're going to do up
Nice.
there. Worry about this down here. And if you do that, that's like taking a grocery list to the store. You've already done it. It cuts down your voting time in half, whether you're going in person or sitting down to do it. It gives you a chance to understand it. Google some of these people. Find out who you like, who you don't like. Make yourself a part of the election. Be involved in it.
Information.
So,
Yeah, in
Actually,
county, we've done, Linda, to speak to kind of, and I'll just talk about kind of the South, so to speak. We've done a lot of the same things in terms of like how we're trying to increase access. And I think one of the things, frankly, if you think about what we're responsible for, each of us, and then collectively, probably there's not many more controversial or heavily laden topics right now than elections. It just so happens that the 3 of us, plus, you know, X amount of county clerks, are in charge of that process for each of our counties. And think about that. We are in charge of the process in each of our counties. It's on us. The responsibility is on each of us. The law that we must implement connected to our elections is on us. And so I think each of us holds that responsibility near and dear. And often at 4 a.m. when I'm waking up, what I do is I start planning and I start thinking, how can we make this better? How can we make this easier? How can we make this safer? And that is frankly how I've gotten ahead of as I've been planning. And every day I've been throwing out things to people in my office, to my staff, and saying, what about this? What about this? What if we did this? No, we can't do that. Well, the law says this. So it's the balance of really wanting to always adhere to the law, but also making it as accessible. So for example, at Doña County, we have a government center, which is, they call it the Taj Mahal, because it's really a beautiful, large building. But it's at the, basically the most west part of town. And we are going to have a huge banner that's, and we get the most turnout there, that says return absentee ballots here. We're going to have some signage up, some flags up. We're going to even have the I voted absentee stickers in a box so people can take them out themselves, because they love that, right? Who doesn't love a sticker? And you can do their selfie. And we're going to have it staffed by 2 people who will make sure that it's secure and will thank you, hopefully be friendly. And so we don't want actually people to even come into our building, right? We want to minimize that as much as we can. So we're doing that across the larger scale sites. On election day, it's 14 of them. So 14 of our sites will have that similar kind of breakdown. And then the other ones will have the smaller boxes. If you have a turnout of 200 on some of the sites, in the very rural parts, that's more appropriate. But I think what we've done to try to get ahead of and to meet voters' concerns and questions, and really want to meet their safety. And what I say is split the difference. Get an absentee ballot and turn it in person. I keep calling that splitting the difference. And so they are able to vote, take their time at home, not have to stand in line. But if they return it in person, they feel comfortable because they see it going through the secure box. But our biggest message, I think, statewide, with Linda, with Maggie, with anybody who's talking about this, which is all of the clerks, is make your plan. And so I was on a call, probably 3 weeks ago, and this gentleman, and it was a friendly crowd. He says, what about the post office? This is how many times have you answered that, Maggie? How many times have you answered that, Linda, sorry. But what I say to them is, I have confidence in the Postal Service, and I will be voting by mail. That's where I'm at. He said, I just don't feel, I said, I understand. You make your plan for you. You take all the information you have and the belief system you have, and you implement that, and then you make your plan. And if it involves you splitting the difference and turning it in person, I support that. If you want to vote early, if you want to vote election day, I support it, but make your plan and consider all the factors involved. Most importantly, your safety, right? And kind of mitigating that and considering all the factors.
So if I'm a parent, I have my absentee ballot and I want to take it in for early voting, right? I could take it to any, to hand in the ballots. Am I allowed to take my kids, my husband's, any family member?
You're an immediate family member or a caregiver.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And there's go ahead, Maggie.
Samia, do you mean into the polls with you?
Yes.
Sure, if you have your kids with you, you can bring them in. Generally speaking, though, only a voter or somebody dropping off a ballot is going to be permitted in a polling place. So,
I thought you meant the actual.
I'm sorry, actually the actual voters.
My bad.
Oh, people voting. Yeah, no, of course you can take your kids with you. And that's something, I always tell the story about when I went into to vote with my mom when I was 4 years old. And that's part of what got me started on this journey. I think, I don't want to speak for our clerks, but I think knowing the two of them as well as I do, I think they would say, please bring your kids. But, please also keep in mind that in this, during this pandemic, we are trying to maintain social distancing and keep the polling places, sanitized and clean, and be wary that when you're going into a polling place, the clerks and their poll workers are going to do literally everything they can to keep it a safe, socially distant, COVID safe environment. But when you're bringing your kids in, just keep that in mind. If you're like me, I have an 11-year-old, I generally try to avoid taking him in with me wherever I can avoid it right now, just because it's less exposure.
I agree. So let's talk about senior citizens, domestic violence victims who are in shelters, unsheltered folks. How do they have access to voting rights and to the ballots?
So two things. So a couple things we're doing, and then if Linda and Amanda have special programs going on, I think it would be great to hear from them. But if you are a victim of domestic violence or stalking, we have a confidential address program through the Secretary of State's office, where basically you can use our office address, 325 Don Gaspar, Santa Fe, for your mailing address in every fashion, including registering to vote. And then we have a new law on the books and a new process where our office works directly with the clerks to facilitate getting an absentee ballot to that voter and getting that ballot back to the county clerk. And that vote will count, but their name's not going to show up in a public record. Their address is not going to show up in a public record. So that's a program that we're doing. If you go to our website, you just search the confidential address program or Safe at Home, and that's where you can get information about that. There's still time to sign up for both Safe at Home as well as to be able to register to vote and get a ballot. There's a few more days for that till October 6th. Secondly, our office just developed a packet of materials that we are providing through the State Department of Aging and Long-Term Services to give long-term and assisted care and senior facilities the guidance that they need those care providers to assist the folks that are receiving services or living in those facilities with how to vote absentee. And so, there's assistance that's often needed, but assistance can't cross the line to, telling an individual how to vote, right? And it makes it really clear, kind of spells it out, what can you do to be helpful? What can you do to facilitate? You can even drop the ballot back off for the voter, deliver it back to the county clerk for them. But, and if they need help filling it out, you can help them do that, but they have to make their own decision, right? So
is that in multiple languages? I'm sorry, is that multiple languages?
So the guidance is provided to the senior care providers. So right now it's in English, but if there were a need and anybody asked us to have it translated, we could absolutely do that.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I cut you off if you want to finish your point.
No, that's all I had.
And I think one of the greatest things that's happened in the last few years was Maggie's ability to get that law passed for domestic violence. That was
amazing.
A lot of women that were just flatly afraid to do anything like that. And it gives them their voice back. It gives them a sense of security. And I thank you, Maggie, because I've got people in that situation that I'm close to, as you do. And so that was a really big plus for her to get that through and get it done. So that should be recognized.
Thank you.
It should be recognized. Are other states doing that, Maggie, or is New Mexico one of the few states?
So many states have the confidential address or Safe at Home program. And what I can't speak to is how many are able to facilitate voting in this way, because the challenge with voting is that your ability to vote is tied to your residence in a community, right? And so how can you protect the confidentiality of the voter while at the same time being able to give them the correct ballot? A lot of states don't have as flexible an absentee process as we do in this state. A lot of my colleagues in other states are talking about how you have to have a witness sign your ballot envelope and you have to have some sort of an excuse to vote vote absentee. So we may be one of the only states, and actually I'm gonna look into that, Samia. We may be one of the only states that does provide the voting opportunity for
Yeah.
participants of that program.
I'm very proud of you. I'm very
That's
proud
a
of
way to
all
start
the
your
work.
life.
Proud of us as a state, you know,
Yes,
just
proud of us as a
how
state,
much we value.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We are, we're very progressive in that, and a driving force in mobilizing women. You know,
It's the first
I am
step in
proud of
starting
Mexico,
over.
absolutely. I'm sorry?
It's the first step in starting over and
Yes, ma'am.
rebuilding. When you come out of a situation like that and you're spiritually and physically and mentally broke, you
Oh,
need to
God.
start over. And being able to vote is really a privilege, and women really appreciate that, Maggie. That was a good thing.
Well, thank you, Linda. I appreciate
Well,
it.
on the 100-year anniversary of the suffragette movement, I think
Yes. Good
it's
thing.
good to bring that up. It's an accomplishment for sure. And may we build on more accomplishments towards women's rights. I forgot the point I was going to bring in. If there's something you want to talk about as far as the fear mongering happening around the voter fraud and everything that's happened, the political climate, is there any fact checks you'd want to clear up? One or two things you'd want to talk about before we go to our next segment. But
Talk to an election official. Don't listen to talking heads. Call your county clerk. Call your secretary of state. Talk to people that are actually in the field doing this job. There's 33 county clerks. There's one in every county in the state. They've got a phone number. Just like Amanda, I return every call I get. So I think most of us clerks do. Maggie returns her phone calls. In New Mexico, we still know our people that hold office. They still, when they can, go door to door. We can pick up the phone and call them. We see them at Smith's.
that's
Don't
right.
be afraid. Talk to somebody that's in a position of authority. Don't listen to talking heads. They're doing that to rally you up.
Yeah, they
I
are.
think we've got a pretty good handle on what's going on in New Mexico right now.
Right. And I think one of the things that I continually do is because I have such a research background, and my route to being clerk came with a very long and large and very deep learning curve. I really had to figure out how good our system was. I did, because I had people asking me a lot of really intricate questions. And so during that time, what I learned made me so confident in being able to talk about elections in a way that hopefully inspires. All the checks and balances that we have in place, all of the implementations that we have in order to keep your vote safe, to keep it secure, to keep our system secure. I mean, I want voters to feel confident in that. And I think part of the challenge is I don't want to feed the beast, right? So when I have 100 different posts that are tagging me, and I'm not even exaggerating me, misinformation, it's like, how deep do I want to dive? And am I feeding that fury, not just with the information and getting defensive, but also for personally myself? Can I walk around with people? And obviously on some level I can, because I get criticized every day, and that's just part of the job. But what I will say is I think we need to be more proactive in how much we talk about how deeply embedded best practices are in what we do, and how we're on. And I say this, Maggie's heard me say this on a few of our road shows, but we are on lists that we're not happy about in our state, that rankings that do not make us happy. But in elections, we do it well. And I think we should talk about that more. And I think we should talk about why. And I think I always say, there's an impression somehow that there's a complacency with county clerks about voter fraud. You will never meet a group of people who are more adamantly opposed to and will do everything they can to bring anybody who is suspected of committing voter fraud to a district attorney or to law enforcement. And then if they're ultimately found to have done anything, we will gladly stand there and support that, because it is our responsibility and it's at our feet. So I will do everything I can to fight it. Some of the challenges, some people will say, like, well, one time this happened. And I'm like, well, when did it happen? Well, in 2012. And I'm like, well, did you report it to anybody? Well, no. And I'm like, okay, well, how are we supposed to know? Like, we need that. You're part of our accountability. Report people. If you're concerned about something, speak up. If you think something's against the rules, ask. that gives us more of a lens to be able to advocate for, those who are doing the right things, right? And then we will definitely use an example, those who are not, but it's so rare. When I did my research about voter fraud, it was literally so rare that it didn't even make a blip on the data radar of votes in our country. But it is such a tragedy, frankly, in our country, that it has become something that is widely held and accepted because it's been encouraged, because that person or whoever they are, fill in the blank, has an agenda that fits them. And I think we should be more proactive. And maybe that's something I'll think about if I'm here in 2 years, and have like a 2-year plan in terms of what Doña County will do to dispel myths and misinformation to support voters' engagement and excitement about participating.
Thank
I
you.
have a question about if I'm voting in person and God forbid, I feel threatened or intimidated in any way, what resources are available? Who should I contact?
Go to the presiding judge at your polling location.
So each polling location is assigned a presiding judge, which is pinch poke, Linda, which is basically
I tried, but you ran over me. Go ahead.
which is basically like the supervisor of the site. And I think, Linda, you all have training that is connected to the instructions that you give specifically. And
Yes,
I wish
we
ours
do.
were a little more detailed. So maybe you can talk about how detailed.
We do. We have classes. We have a good trainer, and we give classes on that. But you're right. Go to the presiding judge at your polling location. They'll notify the authorities. They'll notify our hot room. DA Trottis and I are fixing to do a press conference on voter fraud and what we would do if we find it and what he will do to prosecute it. We're trying to calm the waters and let people know that things are going to be looked at, that people are watching, that we are doing security. We work through the sheriff's department. They're around. People just don't realize they're around. So we go to quite a great deal of extent, but there's going to be somebody with a mouth. There's going to be somebody that wants to smart off. So go to the person that's running the polling location. Talk to them. They know who to contact.
And I actually received an email today from a young man who's going to be a presiding judge for the first time. And he said something like, "Hi, I was hoping to talk with you and have an open and honest conversation about my concerns with some of the rhetoric." And he's probably in his early 20s. And, I'm going to be a presiding judge for the first time. And I'm worried, with all of the rhetoric that's happening, I'm concerned. It just so happened this morning I attended a multi-jurisdictional law enforcement meeting specifically about elections in El Paso, which is, 40 miles from me or so. And so we're going to have a mirror of that meeting this coming Thursday in Doña County, and have invited all the municipalities, the sheriff, the schools, to just come up with a comprehensive plan in terms of the what ifs. What we don't want is frequent patrols. What we don't want is a heavy law enforcement presence that makes people could turn off other people from participating. But we want there to be a heightened awareness that there could be something that they need to respond to should it come to pass.
I want to touch on that, Amanda. Near the colonias, Anthony, Chaparral, you have mixed families that are, some are undocumented, some are registered voters. Has the fear, do you think it would affect voter suppression?
My family's from that area. My family's from La Mesa, La Union, that area. So I'm there frequently. I just can't tell, frankly. I just don't know. What I do know is that and Maggie may be able to speak to this more than I can, because of her experience and knowledge. I know several years ago, before I was clerk, there was an incident, which actually wasn't an incident, but it kind of was in a border area, in which Border Patrol was frequently patrolling, but it had nothing to do with the polling location. And it became kind of this issue because people felt intimidated about going to the polling location. I don't know if you know more about, that's what I've heard.
Yeah, so to that point, and I just will echo what Linda's talking about and what Amanda's talking about, right? So there's public safety and the concerns for public safety around some of the heightened rhetoric. And of course, we need to engage with law enforcement around that, right? Having that situational awareness, those plans that Linda was talking about, those come together meetings that Amanda was talking about, so that everybody's ready to call in law enforcement when people's safety is at risk. However, the flip side is that state law prevents, uniformed law enforcement from being in or around polling locations. We don't want to intimidate voters. And the incident Amanda's talking about occurred at it was actually across the street from a polling location where there were 10 or so ICE vehicles parked because they were actually having a training at the adjacent facility. And so what we do at the state level now is we have a huddle with our federal and state law enforcement partners before every election to go over the roles and the importance of this situational awareness for public safety, but also to make sure, look, you guys need to look at, check in with your federal partners, make sure nobody has a training, planned across the street from a polling place where you're going to see, 10 ICE vehicles or 10 DHS vehicles or something like that. So it's really a difficult balance for our law enforcement partners to strike, but that's our job as election officials, is to make sure we're having that communication with them to be able to address what we need to and not accidentally cause problems. So it's a challenge.
Thank you. I want to talk about the COVID and its impact on Indigenous communities and the devastation it has caused. What have you done to ease the access for voter registration for populations on Indigenous land?
Well, a couple of years ago, we stood up a Native American voting task force for the state. We have leaders from every single tribe and, from the Pueblos, from the Navajo Nation, from the Apache tribes. So we have representation from all of those communities, helping advise our office in terms of how we can do this work better. Every tribal government has a census office where they do and they conduct active voter registration on site. Of course, during the pandemic, a lot of the extra voter registration activities that typically go on in tribal communities have really come to a standstill because it's hard to physically get into those communities because they're closed. So we are now working in partnership, not only with our office, but with another organization called NAVA EP, or the Native American Voter Alliance Education Project, to do some creative things to make inroads into those communities through social media where that's available, because of course many of those communities are on the wrong side of the digital divide, through radio ads in the local native language, and also to provide actual written printed materials to distribute in those communities. Voter registration is a key component, but what we really saw was a huge dip in turnout in those communities. And so making sure that those communities were protected so that they did not have to open up to outsiders, but can still maintain their polling locations, was a big priority for my office. And this summer, in the special session, we passed a bill that actually addresses elections in general this fall, but specifically made sure that those tribal community polling locations were protected and did not have to move away from the community members that use them.
Linda or anybody else?
We have a gal that works with the tribal group here too. That works very closely with Maggie's group in Santa Fe, and she does our Pueblos. And we've worked with them to make sure that they have their polling locations open. One of the Pueblos is not going to allow us on again, and that is their choice. But the other one, we will be able to have a polling location on. However, we put a polling location close to the edge of where they can come out and vote if they want to. We're just not allowed on their lands.
Oh, I see. Okay.
They closed that to us, and rightfully so. They're still worried.
Of course, that's their autonomy. I have a question. Based on what you are seeing with the current census response here, do you have any thoughts about how people of color communities in particular will be affected by funding and redistricting? What I'm hearing, my daughter does census every day. She complains every day about the numbers.
Well, it's obviously a huge concern. You know, I mean, we've suffered from undercount in New Mexico for the last 10 years. We are more than likely going to suffer from undercount in New Mexico for the next 10 years. And I really think that we had our work ahead of us no matter what. But unfortunately, there was a lot of intentional confusion and chaos around the census process. And then you bring in the pandemic and it's the perfect storm. So yes, I do.
Hold on one second. Intentional. Go back. Elaborate.
Yeah, intentional chaos and confusion that was created because unfortunately there was some intentional work done at the highest levels of government to make it seem as though there was going to be an effort to not count non-citizens, to not count current residents of the state, right? And, you know, to really strike fear into the hearts of and discourage our more marginalized communities. And of course, those are the communities that need the funding the most. And those are the communities that suffer the most when they are undercounted. So we are gonna have a challenging 10 years ahead of us. What I will say, and this is gonna be a little provocative and a little kind of out of left field, but depending on what comes out of this election this year at the national level, I think there is the opportunity for a great reckoning when it comes to some of the core aspects of our democracy, when it comes to the Voting Rights Act that has been gutted by the Supreme Court and needs some intentional acts of Congress to fix, when it comes to the census and how we do count people and how we can utilize, you know, modern statistics to supplement those counts, when it comes to money in politics and really the undue influence of especially dark money in politics. I think that we may be on the precipice of a grand reckoning on many of these issues, which would really serve our democracy and our citizens well. But obviously, none of that can happen unless as many people get to the polls as possible and make their voices heard, because they understand how important these issues are to every community.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. You want to comment on that, Linda or Amanda?
Well, I think that's well said. I think she nailed it.
Thank you.
I know
Yeah, I think we agree on that.
my daughter is a census, she works on the census, and she comes home every day so frustrated. She says, Mom, we're going to lose millions.
Yeah.
People in different areas don't want to answer the doors. They don't want to, they're so, I don't know for what reason they're home, but nobody wants to answer the doors. Nobody wants to answer questions. And there's probably a lot of fear mongering going on. It's sad. It's very sad. Thank you for that.
Right down to the schools, Samia, because our schools are undercounted now because the kids are learning from home. We're not getting a good head count on them.
That's right.
My daughter-in-law is the principal at Jefferson Junior High, and she has just been astonished at how her enrollment has decreased because of this pandemic. And she's worried about funding, and that all goes right up the line through the census and everything else because these kids aren't being counted.
How has the pandemic affected your work? I mean, you all three of you have worked in elections previously. We know it's devastated it, but if you can articulate a little how it's impacted your work. And
I have been here every day. I imagine the other two of you have, Amanda, haven't you? And Maggie. I've been in the office every day. I consider myself an essential worker. I've been tested for COVID. Our office is locked down, so everybody is working basically from home. But wow. I'm here. Oh, hi.
Get that cutie fun.
You know, it's a hard job because then you have to make sure that everybody at home that's on a laptop is doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's a big job, and it's a big job to get poll workers and to get them trained. And the nice thing that's happened in our general that we didn't really have in the primary is people, when they found out that it was going to be safe to vote in person in the primary because of how we prepared it, now we've got all of our positions filled, and we have a wait list of about 300 people that'll come to the polls and work on election day for us because they're comfortable in the process that they saw in the primary. So although it was scary in June, it's not quite as scary in November. I feel fortunate in that way.
Thank you.
Well, I can say, you can go ahead and say hi real quick.
Hi, Maggie.
What's her name?
Hi,
What's your name?
Eliana.
They all
Ellie,
know each other. You're all cozy.
well, yeah.
You're on the screen. How many hours a day?
She loves her some Maggie. So I will say we did not, she'd be like, Santa Fe, Maggie lives in Santa Fe, but I thought it was appropriate because this is a women's march and this is my little woman. You know, we closed to in person, which is how we described it, but we never, we always had staff in the office, although not a full staff. We were able to move the majority of our recording and filing. And so I'll talk about that like for 30 seconds. There's a misconception that the only thing we do is elections. And that is like the sexy high profile thing that makes headlines. But we have such an important role in terms of our recording and filing and keeping the business community afloat. I got so many calls from title companies, real estate agents that were deeply concerned that we were going to halt the work that we do. And so we really needed to stay open. And part of it was to contribute to our economy, to support what they were trying to do. Was obviously it's a buyer's market or seller's market. And so we did have our entire recording and filing staff work from home. Part of the challenge is they had slower systems at home. And so they were probably working longer hours and had more accountability, the irony, right? But we had a core staff of a Bureau of Elections, and frankly, they were temps that I didn't want to lose their pay. And so we had a rotating schedule of supervisors, and then we had a lot of our Bureau of Election working from home. Linda has a much larger staff than I do. Linda, I don't know how many. We have 30 when we're fully staffed. And so, you know, Linda, I don't know how many you have.
We had, I think 43 is what an active staff I've got. But we did the rotating too. We had everybody rotate in. Some came 4 hours on Monday and Wednesdays, and then Tuesdays and Thursday afternoons. We rotated everybody in and out. My main staff, Jamie Diaz, Deputy Clerk, Nathan Adamillo, the Administrator, Charles Romero, the Admin, and the Deputy Clerk came in every day. And our PIO, Floyd, came and went as needed because there wasn't anything he needed to do here every day.
And I don't know if anybody else found this, but I found that I work more from home than I do in the office because I have a disconnect when I leave. As you can tell, I have a 4-year-old that wants my attention at a given time and doesn't understand that I have 4 Zoom meetings in a row and she wants X, Y, and Z. So I find myself sometimes working on Friday nights late or Sunday mornings because I wanted to get things done. So during the week I was more accessible. And so I think that, you know, it's the multitasking, frankly, that more women do than men. And so we have to, it's just like it's where we're at, right? And what
Maggie's got an 11-year-old. I've got a 93-year-old mother.
Yeah, well, you do.
God bless. God bless.
So I have that attention at home too. Yeah, I always tease I'm going to go home and throw her some red meat and leave because
My kind of mama, she still has red meat and too. God bless.
all the time.
That's funny.
I'll just add to this piece of the conversation. I mean, everything that Linda and Amanda just described, you know, I identify with or echo. I've been working a lot from home, mainly because I do have a young kid at home and have been homeschooling and not homeschooling in the sense of I'm teaching him everything, but helping facilitate school at home and work. And it's been a huge challenge, obviously. But, you know, I think the biggest thing is for me, so, you know, Amanda and Linda and thank God for them, you know, this is both their first presidential election that they're running. And I remember the first one that I ran, just taking literally every ounce of energy and focus and concentration that I had to be able to do it successfully. That was the 2008 election. And Linda, you'll love this. That year we had 80,000 absentee ballots, and that was like the craziest amount of absentee ballots ever in the history of the world. You're getting ready to mail out 100,000 plus that. So let me just put it that way. But I think the pandemic, so we were already gonna have a crazy year, is my point. Presidential elections are crazy. I call it the circus coming to town. Everybody loses their mind. There's always misinformation and disinformation. It's crazier than ever this year, right? We've got all of these things coming at us all the time. And then you add the pandemic on top of it, and we're having to figure out how we social distance at polling places and how we find, I've got the Santa Fe County clerk up here having to move her whole absentee operation into a convention center because she doesn't have enough room to have a big enough board and socially distance them in the facility that she's got. And we're having to make sure we have thermometers, and we got hand sanitizer for this general election from Anheuser-Busch of all places, donated for free. We're gonna have giant, and so making sure those things are at polling places, right? I mean, just this extra level of logistics and complexity on top of everything else. I think everybody that runs an election this year deserves like hazard pay and 5 extra years of retirement for life, because really this is the biggest job election administrators in this country have ever had to do.
Well, I wonder what self-care is going to look like after post the election for you ladies.
We'll be
I
happy
don't drink, but I have a lot of ice cream. A pint of
I
night.
heard meat. I heard ice cream. I'm coming over your home. All right.
Yeah, I'm a pint of night.
On a real note, this pandemic has hit primarily women, and especially women who can't work because they have to take care of their kids. Unfortunately, a lot of women, in the movement are saying this is going to set us back a generation as far as the workload and careers and where we go post-COVID. We really don't know what the world's going to look like. On that note, how have we seen, hold on, I had it written down. Have we seen an increase in women candidates in New Mexico?
Oh,
In
yeah,
this
I think
pandemic?
we have.
Because 2016 and 2018, I mean, I know the Women's March, we mobilized. We've been at it for 4 years now. We mobilized a lot. And I know I haven't seen enough women of color, though, in New Mexico. Particularly women, I looked for Black women. Nobody was running. And maybe you need another Muslim woman. I don't know, I'll probably be the first one, but we'll talk about that in another 5 years.
You keep
But
going.
what do we see? What are you guys doing as far as like recruiting more women to run and more women of color to run?
It seems like that work would happen more on the party level, frankly, than in terms of my work as a clerk, partly because, in our role in being election administrators, it's really important that we conduct ourselves in an equal, even, nonpartisan way. Right. And so I think any advocacy we do would probably connected to our particular parties that we're connected to. I know I'm an Emerge graduate. I graduated last year. And, during the 2018 election, when frankly was the most challenging professional time I had ever experienced, I felt very alone. I had great support from Maggie. I had great support from my colleague, Lindsay Bachman. And my husband, and of course my mom, but professionally in terms of like women in politics or women on the, kind of in front of policy, I didn't have a lot of connections. And partly that was, just my geography. I was in the very south part of the state. But joining Emerge, participating in when they were able to have, the full in-person experiences, I have made some connections. My norteñas, right? My girls in the north now that, I see whenever I travel, we're like-minded. And so that was really, and I'm a woman's woman. Like I get a lot of my energy from women. They're very important to me at the end of the day. Love my husband, great guy, would pick him again if I had to, but women are really important in my life. And they're great sources of supports in terms of like being my soulmates in their own specific ways. So to have more women like that in my life that understand navigating politics can be very hard. And you have to have those core people that, that know who you are, like to the core, that think the best of you instead of the worst. I like to find women. I recommended even a fellow clerk, just went through Emerge, that, I encouraged her to find those female connections that would really empower her and make her feel included. And I know there was 2 specific people in my community that I encouraged and you can make recommendations to Emerge. So Emerge has been the way that I've been able to route women that want an idea of the framework of leadership in which the party that I'm involved with, works with. Now, something that may be more limited, and there's other aspects, and I support all of them.
It's good to empower women.
Yes.
And that's what we have to do. Ladies as well, Maggie and Linda, please.
Well, I know Linda's been involved with the Democratic Women in Bernalillo County for many, many years, and a big piece of that is recruiting or supporting women running for office. I remember when I very first ran for county clerk, I think the biggest check that I got, I think I raised $45,000, and the biggest check that I got was for about $350, and I got it from the Democratic Women of Bernalillo County.
Wow.
Like Amanda, so I never went through the Emerge program because I was already an elected official and had run for office when Emerge came about in New Mexico. And Emerge, for those of you who don't know, is an organization that's specifically dedicated to recruiting and training women, and has made particular inroads to recruit women of color from around the state to run for all offices at all levels. They do a fantastic job. They've grown their program. We see so many women running for office, and I have just really spent a lot of my time over the years donating my time, whether it be to help with training. I've mentored candidates before. I've worked on recruitment, helping to try to identify people to run. That's what I can do in my spare time when I take my Secretary of State hat off. I do everything I can to encourage and support women running for office, because I just think, the more women we have, the better. And, I'll quote our now dearly departed, very sadly dearly departed, notorious RBG when she said, how many women on the Supreme Court is going to be enough? And she said, when there are 9, right?
Right. That's right.
Anything that's possible.
And we got to make it happen. We have to.
Like Maggie, I was around. I had been elected twice countywide before Emerge even began. So I had kind of gone that gamut too. I was vice chairman of the Democratic Party for 6 years and state president of the Democratic Women for 10 years. And we always had a candidate search committee where we would work in different areas of the state or in different quadrants of the city to try and find qualified women to run. And we were very, very successful. Cheryl Williams Stapleton is one of those. Christine Trujillo is one of those. Gail, what's Gail's last name?
Chasey.
Chasey. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what she used now.
Remember, she was Gail forever. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So, I mean, we've been very successful in bringing women along. So I know Emerge is a very great program. I attended a couple of their boot camps. I really enjoyed getting to know the gals. It's a good thing to do, and it gives you some self-confidence as far as going ahead and running in a race. But the Democratic women do work very hard on trying to find women candidates. When I looked at the women that came in and filed on filing day, and in Bernalillo County, that's a lot. And you were there, Samia. You saw how many. We had a fantastic group of women that walked in and filed for candidates on that day. So I felt very proud to be part of that group that were signing up. That was a nice thing.
It's so empowering. I tell you, I've lived overseas and I know how people live under oppression. So when you come to a space a place like America, where there are structures of democracy and practice, and to be able to vote and to empower women is just such a spiritual thing for me, because you empower a woman, you vote for a woman, you give leadership to a woman, the community changes. We know that, and it goes, from the small to the large, right? And we know politics is, power is all local, right? Local power is everything.
That's it.
As we talked about the Supreme Court, yeah, everything's local. All power is local. The Supreme Court decision, I'm scared. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if he's going to be able to nominate. We're going to try to stop him, but it just brings to light to all the work that we have to do in New Mexico to address, if God forbid Roe is done away with at a Supreme Court level, we still have something on the Constitution here in New Mexico that has to be addressed, and it brings to light the work that we have to do to bring up these issues and to build up candidates that are running for office. There are many courageous women across the state that are running, and we want to uplift all of them. And You know, really, my hat off to all of you. Lisa and Allie, I know they're with me with Women's March. Lisa, are you on mic? Is she still on?
Yeah. Sorry, this is my 5th Zoom of the day.
Oh, God bless you.
Well, welcome to our life.
My third.
I think that's the COVID life, by the way, Zoom.
Mm.
And it's good to be in the backyard, because if you're in the kitchen, you're looking at the kids, you're looking at the sink, and you're trying to concentrate on the Zoom. Doesn't work. You
Yeah, I'm
have some.
stuffing my face here. But yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead. Why don't you answer, give your questions?
Well, one question I had was if any of y'all had any insights about the Electoral College and as to, you know, whether there was any possibility that we might make a change in that regard, because I think the fact that
That's a Maggie question.
yeah, I think so.
So,
The fact that we had a popular vote, right?
no, it's a great question. So, no, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
So I was lucky enough when I was lucky enough to be in Linda's seat to participate in a task force many years ago that studied the National Popular Vote Initiative and the potential compact. And it's funny, I like to tell this story because when I went into that task force, I was dead set against the state of New Mexico going into the compact, and I'll explain what that is in a quick second. Because I felt like New Mexico had been a swing state for many years. Our 5 electoral votes really counted in the grand scheme of things. Presidential candidates came to New Mexico, and if it was all of a sudden a popular vote issue, that all of a sudden our 1.3 million registered voters would fall to the wayside in the grand calculus, right? However, during the course of that experience, I learned a lot, and one of the best presentations I received were from 2 gentlemen who had helped conduct then President George W. Bush's campaign in Ohio in 2004. And they came in and explained how the entire Electoral College vote came down to 80,000 votes in one county in Ohio. Because that is how the electoral calculus, so it actually shrinks the population even further, and that changed my mind. And a couple of years ago, I helped advocate for, I was one of many, but we successfully passed the National Popular Vote Initiative, Compact Initiative here in New Mexico. So we are now part of the compact. So when we get to 270 electoral college votes worth of states, I believe now we are somewhere hovering around 200 electoral votes worth of states in the compact, it will automatically go into effect. And basically what that will do is when the states who have that 270 electoral college votes will all agree to award their state's votes to the popular vote winner.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally believe that is the best chance we have, short of, I don't think Congress is gonna pass a constitutional amendment down to the states to ratify anytime soon. I don't think a constitutional convention is going to be called anytime soon. So I think that compact, and if we can get just 70 more electoral college votes worth of states to participate in the compact, I am personally now very much of the belief that in order to democratize presidential elections, like we democratized elections for the US Senate many years ago, that is what we need to do and really begin to award the presidency to the popular vote winner.
Is there a place we can go to find out about what states might be influenced, or, the kinds of things that we might be able to do to sort of try to sway people's opinions?
Google National Popular Vote Initiative. That is the organization that's been running the campaign for probably about a decade now, and you'll see those states. I'm sorry, I don't know them off the top of my head, but you'll see the states that are still on the list. Yeah.
Awesome. That's all I needed. Yeah, it's just a resource. Thanks.
That's excellent. Do you have any other questions, Lisa?
Oh, I think that's it.
Allie, are you good?
Linda mentioned that there's a waiting list for poll workers. I wonder how we're doing around the rest of the state.
Well, funny enough, I just asked that question. We had was on a Zoom with Linda and Amanda earlier today. A weekly check-in with all of our county clerks statewide as we're getting ready, and that is a question that I asked of everybody because, of course, you know, as Linda and Amanda both mentioned, that was for their counties in particular one of the bigger challenges in the primary, but for many counties around the state, you know. Voters in New Mexico, from what I can tell, have stepped up to the call for poll officials. And as you know, I'm not sure where your waiting list is now, Amanda. You know, Linda said hers is at 300. Our Santa Fe County clerk said that hers is at something like 500. We appear to be in good shape. I asked again today, any last calls for help getting poll officials, and you know, was resounded with crickets, which is a good problem to have. So, and I don't know, Linda and Amanda, if you know more from talking with your county clerk colleagues directly where there might be more need, but it sure sounds like we're in good shape from where I'm sitting.
I think we're all hanging pretty good, aren't we, Amanda? From your end, I hear that, and up north, we're good.
Yeah, I think when we talked about what was keeping us up at night, you know, kind of in June and July heading into, that was one of the things. And, you know, I did some very extensive targeted poll worker recruitment that was a lot of this with probably 25 different organizations across Doña County. And it thankfully resulted in an outstanding and humbling outpouring of help from our community. And so we talk about who props up our elections, and, you know, definitely I just, you know, so we've had approximately, now keep in mind, historically, we've had about 260, 280 people on our list, and not every single one of them was used necessarily, but most of them were, whether it was through early voting or absentee or election day. But we had over, I think, 507 applications. So to tell you that I'm feeling optimistic, but I'm also like, oh, Lord, please let them all show up. We've already made our appointments. So I'm very careful. Like, it looks like things are great. I'm feeling good. But, you know, that's the thing about our job, is we can never say absolutely and 100% because we count on other people. And, you know, I can control myself, and you know, but that's about it. So, but I'm feeling good and positive and thrilled with the outpouring of support from our community who want this election to be run well, and we want all of our polling locations open. I was particularly concerned about my southern community in the border area, which frankly we had to consolidate many of their locations during the primary, and it made me literally sick to my stomach. Yes. So I did everything I could to make sure that didn't happen, and I feel pretty good today.
On election day in Bernalillo County, we will have 1,000 poll workers and election officials working under the county clerk's banner. And that's not our employees. That's not the watchers. That's not the challengers. Those are people from the citizens of Bernalillo County running our election.
That's wonderful.
It's run by them.
Wonderful. That's such a beautiful thing to see. Another question that's maybe controversial. How do we vet all our poll workers?
We have a really good training program, and they all go through it. And they have to take an oath and sign that they'll be good, honest citizens and do as they're asked. We have a dress code. Most people are real agreeable to doing that. And when they get there and they find out it's going to be a long day with not very much money, most of them that really have a problem, that aren't dedicated, will go home.
Well, for 1,000 people to rise up during COVID, that's dedication.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. What do you say to New Mexicans who are going to be anxious to get the results of the votes come October 4th?
You're anxious too.
You're what?
Oh, I think it's
three of us are anxious too.
I know. I think that's the funny thing.
We wait a week.
I've been asked that. In fact, I was asked today. And I said, the likelihood that there will be a delay is pretty much, you know, in terms of our unofficial results. And I remind people, like, results are always unofficial. There's a whole other process that we go through in our post-election, you know, in our canvas. And then, of course, it goes through the Secretary of State's office. And so that there's already more routes. but I have been there reloading that page saying, what is taking them so long? And so what I am saying to everyone who asks me is expect a delay. We will have everything we can up before we have to leave for the night. We will stop at 11 because the law tells us we have to, but by 11, everything that we have tabulated at this point will be uploaded. And also know, and this is important, that if there's a delay, that means that we're doing everything right. That means we are doing our due diligence. We are taking our time. We are treating one ballot as important as the first one, as important as the last.
That's true.
Excellent. That's excellent to report. Wow. Well, you know, New Mexico Women's March. Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, go ahead, Linda. Did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with Amanda. We feel pretty good with what we've got set up and what we're ready to do. It'll be late. It'll go late Tuesday night and go into Wednesday. I mean, just the sheer volume of our absentee ballots right now. On the primary, we had 17,000 absentee ballots delivered on election day. On election day. And that was on top of everything we had done up to election day. So you talk about some tired folks at 11 o'clock Tuesday night. They were falling asleep on the table. So we expect the same thing to be more, and we've already got more requests than we ever had. So we've expanded.
That's good,
We're hoping we can cover it. Oh yeah, people are involved. They're passionate. There's a lot of passion in this, and you got to respect that and love it.
Oh, there better be passion. I love to say everything. Our democracy is at stake. Let's put it that way. We're marching October 17th. So hopefully we'll see you. And I want to ask you the mobile unit that you're going to have on 5th and Marquette. Is that during certain days or will it be available
just
on the
on
17th?
election day from 7 to 7?
Just election day. There's no way you could do a women's march.
Out there. You'll see it. It'll say Bernalillo County Clerk. And there will be people there, so it'll be very visible, and it'll be from 7 to 7. You can just drive right through there, drop it off, and go to Dairy Queen.
Very good.
Yes. Ice cream. Gotta have our ice cream.
You know what? You're my kind of girl.
Yeah.
You're my kind of girl. You know, this has been so uplifting to hear and empowering to see women so confident and have done the job so well. I mean, it makes me so proud to say I'm a New Mexican. Thank you. Thank you so, ladies, for joining us today. And we're going to hope for the best. I hope.
3 of us. We got a whole county of
You know
people.
what? We're the cutest show in town. You are on different Zooms, but we're the best in town. All right, let's just remember that.
Okay.
Women's March. I don't want to make enemies, but New Mexico Women's March is special because we celebrate women and we love to empower the sisterhood and uplift all the work, the beautiful work that you do. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, County Clerks, Linda and Amanda.
You guys take care.
Please have a great night.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Voting. Take care.